Well, because most people don't know the full story behind Robert Louis Stevenson and what he was doing and how exploitative he was of Samoa. And on the other hand, of course, Samoans are now very exploitative of Robert Louis Stevenson. They cash in on the legend. But Robert Louis Stevenson wouldn't have even got into modern Samoa. For starters, he had tuberculosis. He was unqualified to come into Samoa. He wasn't bringing anything. He was an arms trader. And I've said it many times over the years. How come Robert Louis Stevenson ended up owning a prime piece of real estate in Samoa, where in theory you cannot own land, and yet he ends up owning land? And so I don't buy into the story behind Robert Louis Stevenson. I think there's more to him that points to a crooked man. But equally, I think he's a sideshow in the Samoan story. And unfortunately, it's very useful for Samoan tourism to go with that particular story. But, Vailima, you don't hear it, but Vailima in 1899 was destroyed by the British Navy. They shelled it. The house was practically destroyed. Why doesn't anybody in Samoa discuss why the Royal Navy and the United States Navy were killing dozens of Samoans every day by randomly firing shells into Samoa and into Apia, into Vailima, into all around the place, all up and down the coast of Upolu? Instead, we get this romantic story about Robert Louis Stevenson. And I would further challenge, how many people in Samoa have read a single of his books? So that's my argument against Robert Louis Stevenson.
When you voiced this, your concerns about the way Samoans portray or the love affair that we have with Robert Louis Stevenson, did you get much pushback? Because I know, us as Samoans, we get kind of we're territorial. We don't like people talking about our heroes or people that we hold in high regard.
I don't get much pushback simply because that period of history of Samoa, the period from say about 1890 through to 1914, has become almost unknown to most Samoans. And if you're getting told often enough in advertising that this is the great man and he's got a grave on top of the mountain. I mean, I'll give you an example here. I'm sure you're familiar. In Samoa, the people who die, who are loved, are buried in the front yard. What are they saying by putting them on a mountain as far away as possible?
Well,
I rest my case.
I can see that makes absolute sense. Yeah.
So it's not a criticism of modern Samoa. It's almost a desperate appeal as an author. Hey, there's some really interesting stories here. There's really interesting mysteries here. And that period of Samoan history is full of superheroes, in my view. And Mataafa Yousefa is an epic character. A man so magnificent, I cannot understand why Samoans haven't got a statue of him at Molinuu. Instead, they have monuments to dead Palangis at Molinuu. And you say to people, Mataafa was a man who defeated the armies of the United States, of Britain, and of Germany. Name me one other character on the planet who did that. And there's an ignorance in Samoa about it. And shall we say, it's my life's mission in my twilight years to sort this out and get it straight. And Samoans will not need Robert Louis Stevenson as their hero. They will honour Mataafa Yousefa, whose land it was that Vailima is on. So that's why I don't think I get pushback. I think I get recognition from Samoans in a way that of an ignorance about that particular period of history. And don't forget, Robert Louis Stevenson was also largely reinvented by the New Zealand administration after 1914. It was a useful tool because apart from anything else, Vailima became home to the administrator. And so it was a continuity of Anglo-Saxons and Scots ruling Samoa in a way.
What was Robert Louis Stevenson's sort of like position during that time? Because I know I've read that during that time it was the British were down here, the Germans were down here, and the Americans, they were just trying to fight over the land and stuff. And then while that was happening with the bombing and all that, what was Robert Louis Stevenson doing at that time? Well,
the interesting thing about Stevenson was that he was actually, for the 4 years he lived in Samoa, he was mostly dying. He was a very sick man. And he wrote, well, there are some letters that he wrote and things that have subsequently become books. There's about 4 volumes of them and things. Some of the really great writing and some of the great advocacy was done by his widow, Isabel, or Tewila, and they wrote some fierce, for example, in the 1899 assault on Upolo by the British and the Americans, she wrote some most powerful stuff, saying, why are we killing women and children in the night? Why are we firing shells into all these villages? She was, in fact, at the time, one of the few voices. The Catholic Archbishop of Australia was another, saying, we've got to stop this. So Stevenson was not really much of a player in the politics of Samoa. And what's important to say here is that it's a kind of Palangi mindset to say Robert Louis Stevenson was this, that, or the other thing during the conflicts. He was just an observer. He was on the side. Mataafa Yousefa, Malietoa, the first Malietoa Tana Mawhili, the Tupua Tamasese, Lialofi #1. These were the people that were running Samoa. They were operating in the Samoa where the foreign powers were pressing in on them and things. These are the people we should now be focusing on, not the casual. In fact, it's a bit like the way people honour and respect Robert Louis Stevenson. It's a bit like if you were to cover politics today and you would honour and praise, say, John Campbell for being in Samoa. Well, it's all bullshit. The real decision making is being made by the Samoans, who were A, fighting, B, dying, C, had a vision for what they wanted an independent Samoa to be. Stevenson was a pleasant writing chap who was, as it happens, was extremely wealthy, but largely irrelevant to the story of defining Samoa.